So my friends, with the release of the new LG C1 OLED, one thing that is supposed to be improved with the new A9 Generation 4 processor is the upscaling and HDR content. So in this video we're going to be comparing those two things, and also we'll be comparing them against the C10 to see is there that much difference between the C1 and the older model. Don't forget to hit the red button to subscribe and give this video a thumbs up and click the notification bell to get my next video first. If you are in two minds which TV to get, then also check out my direct comparison between the C1 and the C10. I'll leave the link in the description. So the first test that we're going to use is Outriders. It's a brand new PS5 game. It's incredible with these new OLED TVs, and it really does showcase what's possible. I'll leave a link in the description for this game if you haven't already seen it. It is absolutely stunning. Now the one thing that surprised me, and it wasn't really my takeaway from this video, was how good SDR content is on the LG C1. The gap between SDR and HDR is so small, it's just crazy. Don't get me wrong, HDR is far better, but comparing it to the difference on the C10, they were like night and day, and I'll show you that in just a few moments. Okay, so I will also show you some normal TV in a second, but as this game plays through, just look at the details around the actual character, look in the shadows, look at the backgrounds, and there you'll see the HDR coming into its own. Don't worry the fact that it's not lining up completely, because I've had to play these games individually in each mode and try to line them up as close as possible, just so that you can get a better idea. But effectively what I've done is I've recorded the screen using my Sony 4K camera, and hopefully it comes across the differences. Now here I would say the difference is probably about a 10 to 15% improvement with the HDR on. It really does add to the whole gameplay, and in certain scenes, some of those darker scenes, when you're looking in the sides and on the backgrounds, it does come into its own. It is absolutely stunning, and when I show you it with the C10, it will also become apparent how good the SDR is on the C1 compared to the C10. Okay, so to give you an indication of how good that C1 SDR is, here they are zoomed in side by side. Now don't get me wrong, there is definite improvements on the HDR. I would say 10-15% as I said in the last clip, but that SDR is a great improvement compared to the previous model, and I'll show you that in just a second. It is literally the difference between night and day compared to the C10. Okay, so as I move forward, I'm going to freeze frame and you'll get an idea of the extra detail, and I've tried to freeze frame it as close as I possibly can. So if you look into the distance and you see the wooden slats and you see how much of them are appearing on the right hand side, on the HDR side, then you get an idea of the level of quality of detail. And as we move through, you'll see that that also is apparent in the distance as it comes through this little part here, and then also as it opens up into the main scene. It really is quite impressive. Okay, so we're switched over now to the C10. We're putting it into SDR mode, and this is where it is just an incredible difference of how much poorer the SDR mode is compared to the C1. It really is a difference of night and day, and obviously the black detail is still brilliant because it's an OLED still, and you've got 4K resolution still, but that HDR just makes all the difference. And the difference between HDR and non-HDR, or HDR and SDR on the C1, is a massive smaller gap than it is on the C10. Because if I now bring in this same scene but do it on HDR with the C10, you'll see the difference between the HDR and SDR on the C10 is far wider than what it is on the C1. And that bodes well for the C1 in terms of general upscaling right across the board. Now, whether you think that it's worth having the C1 for the HDR content compared to the C10 HDR content, we'll compare those in a second. But let's just look again at that SDR content for that same scene. And as you can see, it is the difference between night and day. Okay, so we're now back onto the C1, and I've got this side by side here of standard dynamic range and high dynamic range on the right hand side, and as you can see, the difference between the two are a lot less. And again, in just 1 second, I will put the two C10s together and then I'll try and mix all four. Now, obviously, what device you're watching this on is going to make a bigger impact. But believe me, when you're sat in front of the actual TV playing the game, the difference is, well, it's huge. I found it quite big just on the C1 between standard dynamic range and high dynamic range, let alone when we went to the C10. I just didn't think that there was going to be this bigger gap. And as you can see with these two side by side, it is just incredible, the difference. It's almost like playing a different game. Okay, so now let's look at all four together. And so I've tried to get the similar type of angle. And as you can see, starting on the left, you've got the C10 standard dynamic range, going up to high dynamic range, then onto the C1, which actually the C1, I found the SDR mode was almost similar to the HDR mode on the C10. It was quite incredible. And then the best of the lot, definitely, without a doubt, was the C1 HDR. It really was a big difference. I'm sorry these are not lined up properly. It was the best that I could do. Now, this next test was one that really surprised me. This is a SDR shot on the C10. And as you can see, it looks pretty good. The blacks are great. It's an OLED after all. This is the HDR shot on the same C10, and suddenly you're getting a lot more detail. And if I put these two images on the same screen, you'll see the bottom one, you're seeing a lot more of the chair. There is just a lot more detail right the way through. And if I show you these shots of some movement, then again you'll see the corridor in the dark spots. This is the SDR version, and if I now go through to the HDR version, again you just get a lot more detail and you get better colors. And again, if I show you the same clip with both head to head or one above the other, the SDR shot is on top and the HDR shot is on the bottom. Okay, so now we're going to do the same thing with the C1, and this is where it's very surprising. As you can see on the C1, you can see more of that chair in SDR mode, and when I go to HDR, there's almost no difference at all. It was really quite surprising, and I even went back over the footage to make sure that I switched from HDR to SDR and vice versa. And likewise on this shot here, you can see it's in SDR at the moment. The next clip is HDR, and again there is almost no difference at all. And when I put them one on top of the other, as I did previously, you'll see the differences are very, very subtle indeed. Okay, the next thing I'll do is combine all four of those still shots. So you've got the C10s on the left, the C1s on the right. What's your thoughts? Which ones do you think look the best? Certainly you can't see the chair almost at all in the C10, and you can in all the others, but all of the others look very, very similar. It's surprisingly similar. So my friends, in summary, I'm going to try and pull this together and draw a conclusion. This, by the way, what you're looking at now is the C1. What I would say is that the C1 in SDR is definitely far superior than the C10. As all of those shots saw, it brings in a lot more lightness. So that processor is definitely doing something to improve the picture. So in general TV watching, in HD content, then it's going to be superior. I don't know whether the difference in HDR content was that much superior to warrant the extra price. I guess that's going to be down to you as an individual, to what you think. But the combination of those two, so great HDR performance and also great upscaling performance of that new processor, well then that is something definitely worth mentioning and worth bearing in mind, because it was a bigger difference than certainly I was expecting. But let me know what your thoughts are, guys. I hope this video has just thrown a little bit more light on the question of which one of these TVs you should buy. Should it be the C1 or would you still stick with the C10? Let me know in the comments, but thanks again my friends for watching this video, and I really do look forward to seeing you on the next.